What's up, family? Welcome back to the Stop Sinking Show, where we go from struggle to flow. Today I want to talk about leadership. A great leader is one who does not want any followers. That is not the goal of a leader. A true leader is someone who makes more leaders. The real measure of your leadership is if you have empowered the people you are responsible for leading into taking up the lead themselves. If you are leading them into how to be a great follower, you are really only serving yourself. Leadership is servitude in itself, and in that, it is not meant to serve itself. It is meant to serve the very people you are responsible for leading. And the goal of that is to make them no longer need you and to ultimately put them in a position to serve as a leader as well. That is the best result of successful leadership. Now, while we might understand this intellectually, it is a cute thing to say. Very few of us actually play it out in our lives. Because what is hidden in here, in this assumption of service and of creating more leaders, is that your leadership has to be devoid of expectation. Because with your expectation, you can only impose a way of being and believing. Because you are trying to bind people into living up to the expectation of following you. But when you lead people into freedom, your expectations then are those that actually liberate them, not one that bind them into your way of being or your path of achieving. Let's bring this into some practical terms so you can challenge your leadership. When you ask your kids, your spouse, your friend, or anyone to do something, and this is different than when you are leading somebody at work because you have to have a little bit of stronger expectations of how your customers should be served. But when you're talking about your kids, your spouse, your friends, or anyone else to do something in your life, when you present what they should do as a way of avoiding mistakes that you have made, or in a way to direct them. Again, different with an employee because you can have a few expectations of your employees. But again, I always believe the best leaders tell you the what, not the how. They don't tell you how to achieve the what that we are trying to go for. That's the best thing about hiring people who are intelligent, because you let them come to life in their own way. Now, when you're talking about people in your own life, how much attachment do you have to the information and direction that you are giving them to be followed? And if you are like me, you have struggled with this. It is natural for us to care for someone so much that when you give them advice to tell them to do something, we load that advice with expectation of it actually being followed. Because when you care for someone and you know something that might help them, you kind of have this attachment to them following it. Because you don't want to see somebody who is somebody you care for do something that's hurting themselves. And we call people who take advice and not follow it assholes. As if because they asked for the advice, that they are now somehow bound to our way of being and could not themselves consider whether or not to do it, or could not have it past their own scrutiny or their own desired action threshold. Maybe they don't want to do it. Maybe they are just lazy. Maybe they don't think that we were right. Maybe they don't think it's right for them. All of this is possible. So if they end up making the mistake that we made anyway, despite the advice that we gave them, is that really a bad thing? Should we be judgmental of it? And again, if it's somebody you care for and they're hurting their health, this is, again, something hard to accept. But again, as someone who has struggled with this, I realize that you cannot lead people into living up to your expectations or in a way to save them from what their soul needs them to learn in their own way. You cannot help or save people out of what their soul needs to go through. And this is a difficult one for me and why I am talking about it here. You cannot raise your kids to live up to your expectations. You can only guide them and provide them with examples by way of being that way yourself. And hope, just hope that what you want is caught, because it is rarely taught. Especially with kids, they learn by osmosis. They absorb what they are around. Now, the problem with doing this with kids is that unlike dealing with our peers, we think that with our kids, we have some level of power or can push our agenda even harder. As if because they are smaller, they are less of a person and so should be less resistant or more influenceable. And the most dangerous part is that we tie our love to it. We withhold our love when our expectations are not met and give it as a reward when it is. And again, I ask you to reflect. Does this look like leadership to you? One that comes without its own loaded agenda. And we can hide behind the mask of, I know what's best because of my experience in XYZ, but you can't say that without diminishing the spirit of another person, be that a small child or not. Again, your leadership isn't about you. It is about getting them to become leaders as well. And that rebelliousness that does not agree with you, that you don't like, is the actual very goal you should be trying to encourage. You see, it is easy to put yourself in the leadership role and think that you are leading, but it is not easy to love people and lead them into their own way of being, and not according to our ways, not according to our liking. We rarely love people into leading. We love them into following instead. It takes work for us to love without expectation. Love without expecting people to conform to our way of being. If you really, really want to be a leader, understand that the message is greater than the messenger. And even more than that, understand that the person being led is greater than it all. They have their own natural God-given spirit, their own inclinations, their own things to learn, their own calling. And in that is an opportunity for you to become an even greater leader. Because anytime you lead, it is two-way traffic. You have to take into account what is being offered back to you by the person you are trying to lead, and then lead according to that traffic and what it's telling you. And that is leading in love, leading to love. And the greatest thing that you can do above all as a leader is to provide that kind of love. Unquestionable, unshaken, unlimited, unconditional, and untouched by your own intentions. This is the kind of love, the kind of leadership that awakens the leader in us all. Love you, family. Stay true. See you on the next show.